Okay, so we have another guest, another person who contributed to this extraordinary project. And we're not really allowed to say who you are. So, introduce yourself in whatever way you want, sir.
I'm a Fife farmer who moonlights as a distiller sometimes.
That seems fair. So when you got this book, what was your thoughts? Or when you were asked to be part of this project, did you go, oh no? Or
no,
did you go?
There was a lot of things in the book that I'd been wanting to try for a very long time. Various aspects of it that, due to time constraints and whatnot, I'd never actually got round to doing, like the floor maltings. But I'd had it kind of thought out in my mind how I was going to go about it. So when this came along, I thought, oh, this is the ideal opportunity to put into practice what I've been planning for many years, but just never got round to doing. So yeah, and the book also gave me a manual of how to do it. You know, there was bits like the floor malting that I'd never had any practical experience of hand turning malt and stuff. But in the book, it explains exactly how you should do it and how you shouldn't do it. And we tended to find everything that it said don't do, we ended up doing. So, because the book told you not to do it, I assumed that was what was common practice at the time. So ours is more authentic that way.
So, I mean, what issues did you have? I mean, I suppose maybe take that back a wee bit. So you immediately went, because the brief was quite a wide one.
Yeah.
Just do what you want with this book. But you honed in on floor malting, on brewer's yeast and stuff. So what was the thought process behind all of that?
Well, like I said, I planned on experimenting with yeast. I'd planned on doing my own floor maltings. I'd planned on doing things, but when you're working in a distillery, you have a lot of time to think, but not a lot of time to do stuff. So it's all very well having plans to do stuff, but when you need to get on with the day job, it's hard to actually sometimes stop and get it to fit in. Yeah. So the book was plus on the distilling side of it, a lot of what the book was talking about was what we were already doing. Fairly long fermentations, ripening the wash, stuff like that. So I thought I don't need to do very much different to actually fit in with what's been spoken about. I wasn't having to do anything too radical.
So tell us about the malting and what you did, because the malting was a continuous part of farming, distilling, but for somebody starting from it.
And he says, how much are you doing? And I says, I thought I'd try 10 tonne. And he went, 10 tonne? He says, there's a reason all the malt floors were only 5 to 7 tonne. Now managing, but now I know why they're 5 to 7 tonne.
So you're setting up as a little micro maltster for the rest of the industry?
It's maybe a bit like childbirth. It takes you a while to forget how hard it was before you want to do it again.
But speaking to you, I was surprised that the yields were so well.
Yeah.
It yielded so well.
Yeah.
Does that speak to modern farming techniques or controls?
I don't know. Let's say, the book says don't overload the floor. Yeah. And I thought we hadn't, but the malt expands and suddenly your floor's overloaded. Don't overload the kiln, don't do this, don't do that. And we found at each stage, oh, now I know why it says that.
Yes. How practically did you do this then? I mean, given you didn't have a malting floor, given you didn't have a kiln. I mean, it seems you chose a very
we used 2 grain trailers as steep tanks. Right. So we put the grain in the train, filled it up with water, sucked the water out, filled it up, sucked the water out, filled it up, just as the prescribed. A hard bit was I couldn't gauge the moisture in the grain. You want to get the moisture up to 45-50%. My meter only goes up to 30%, so that was no use. And it says in the book, if you can crush it end to end between thumb and finger, No, I could never. Maybe I had stronger thumbs in those days or something, but I struggled with that. But I did it for the prescribed time at the sort of temperatures they were talking about, so I thought it must be about there. There was a lot of bits like if you did it again, you would know, once you've done a thing a few times, you start to learn. But when you're doing it for the first time, is this right? Is it not? And then we spread it out on the floor, and then it starts to expand, and suddenly it's this thick, then it's this thick. When it's this thick, it's very easy to pull a rake through. When it's this thick, the roots, not so much. And things like that. So we steeped it in a couple of trailers, spread it out on a shed floor. We actually used the potato shed, which is quite good because it's got a cold store in it. So if it was getting a bit hot, I could put the chill on and bring the temperature down. But again, in theory that's great, but not, because in the cold store it just blows cold air over the top. So the top got a little bit cool, but it didn't cool the bottom.
Right. So you had to turn more.
More work.
Yeah. And then for kilning?
Kilning, we used a grain dryer.
Right.
Just on the farm with a floor grain dryer. So, but again.
So you're going back to moonshining essentially. Yeah,
but again, we couldn't get the grain dryers decided to dry barley and not kill the germination. So it's a slow, gentle thing. A kiln is much hotter. So my dryer couldn't reach a high enough temperature. And the same, we had a feeble attempt at peating. I tried to get peat from Orkney because there's lots of records of Fife distillers using Orkney peats.
That's right.
Even the grain distillery at Cameron Bridge was using Orkney peat
from
at one
Eadie,
time.
yes.
So I ended up with 4 25-kilo bags of peat, which are burnt in a sort of garden incinerator thing slowly to produce smoke and put it in front of the fan. But it's a great big fan, and it just blows the smoke through the grain out very quickly. So like in a traditional kiln, the malt would be sitting pickling in the smoke. It was just getting blown through. So I think we got 2 or 3 parts per million of phenols so
and
it's the lightest lightly peated malt ever.
And do you detect any in the spirit?
No. You could on the malt. The malt smelt very peaty. The whole farm smelt peaty. But the spirit didn't.
But maybe added something.
I don't think so. I think I would have needed near a ton of peat rather than my 100 kilos.
And of course you used yeast. It was common at the time as well.
That was, I hadn't actually calculated out how much yeast I would need and how much was available. I just thought breweries produced lots of yeast. I'll just ask and it'll not be a problem. And they all said, yeah, no problem. But we did it in January, and brewers are not brewing a lot in January because there's not a lot of beer sales then. So we got 50 kilos of spent yeast from one brewery, and he says, well, I'm not doing another batch for another couple of months. I thought, I could do the same again next week and twice the week after. So we ended up using 3 different breweries, and even then we were sometimes getting yeast and we would do a mash and we would distill that through, and then we were kind of stopped for a day till we couldn't do continuous mashing and distilling because we could only do it when the yeast was available. And I was doing a wee bit co-pitching, adding a bit of our distiller's yeast, because the brewers told me that their yeast wouldn't take it down to like 997, wouldn't take it down low enough to allow the wash to ripen. So I did a wee bit of that, and that also allowed me to bulk out the brewing yeast a little bit and get a few more mashes in from the available brewing yeast.
And it was frothy?
Oh, very. Normally when we do a mash, shut the mash, the wash back up, put the switcher on, go away home, check it maybe 10 o'clock at night or something, it's just starting to come up. You come in the morning, it's been up, it's fought the switcher for an hour or so, and it's collapsed back down. The brewing yeast just kept coming and coming and coming, and it fought the switcher and it beat the switcher and it came over the top and it was all over the floor, and so the next one, right, we'll use anti-foam, half rate anti-foam, same again. Next one, full rate anti-foam, same again, double anti-foam.
So, and did it ferment right out?
Yeah.
So it just...
Yeah. It just lively.
Yeah.
Just
At what point did you think, oh no,
every
why
morning.
did I start?
Every morning when you came in, so I've got to have this to clean up again.
And so would you repeat these sort of things, Francis?
Yeah, but again, it takes you a few runs to learn.
Yes.
And then, you know what to expect.
Yeah.
Let's not fill the washback quite so full. Let's give it a bit more headspace. Put some anti-foam in from the start, maybe. Either that, employ a young boy with a stick.
Yeah, I was wondering
It's a
about
big stick.
Heather Bism.
Right. But yeah, that in itself is interesting because it must have given you a real insight into what it was like back there.
Yeah.
In the 1920s.
Yeah.
Here are all the problems and the potential issues that could arise.
But that's not too bad, That's just a case of scrubbing down the sides of the washback and cleaning the floor. It's trying to control that in a still where you've got a coal fire underneath it. That's maximum respect.
Hitting it with a wooden ball.
Yeah, to see if it's foaming.
So,
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
So did you come away? What were the insights that you came away with? What have you taken away from this, and are you going to apply this to your whiskey going forward? Or just don't do this?
No, I wouldn't say don't do it. It's, like I say, we'll have another go at some point. I don't know when, but I would maybe not do everything at the same time. Mm-hmm. I'd maybe try brewer's yeast with our standard malt and see how that works. Use floor malted barley with our standard yeast and see what we get. Because trying to pick out which components have done what in the final spirit is kind of tricky. If you make one change at a time, it'd be easier.
Aye, do that.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Do this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, right, that works. That
Yeah.
doesn't work. Then incrementally build up.
Yes.
And so, how would you describe the new make?
Very herbally. Sort of a hint of menthol cigarettes about it.
The menthol note.
Yeah. I used a very hoppy Belgian ale yeast sort of in the middle of the run, and it was more noticeable the vegetable, herbal, menthol character coming through after that. So different from what you produce. Yeah. So whether that's coming from the residual hops, when you draw the yeast, we were using spent brewer's yeast, so it had bits of hops and things in it. It had the flavour from the hopping of the ales. If I could have had that in a much lesser degree, I think it would have been better. Again, using a farmhouse ale or lagers or brown ales and things like that, which we also used. We just had to take what was available. I think would have produced a better spirit than the super hoppy stuff. Again, super hoppy beers are sort of a more modern phenomenon, I think.
Sure. But then, and again, that in itself is an interesting insight into what distillers might have been faced with. They didn't always necessarily have a reliable supply of yeast, so they would be conceivably jumping about from one brewery to another.
Well, even within the one brewery, a brewery would maybe make different 60 shilling, 80 shilling, whatnot, and would they separate out the yeasts, or would it just all be dumped into a barrel and shipped off to the distillery? So one day you're maybe on 60 shilling yeast, another day on 80 shilling yeast, or lager yeast, or whatever they're producing.
Do you think that would mean a less consistent spirit? I'm asking both of you this now. if the yeast kept shifting, then would you have just one unified, consistent style, or would there be variations to that?
There would be variations, but the time you go through the process, you're distilling it to low wines, then to faints, the spirit, it evens out batch inconsistencies, and then your spirit receiver, we distill for a week into the receiver before casting it off. So as long as you had the same variations week to week, it would sort of balance out a bit.
Speaking to that, because we were speaking about the regionality, and the book speaks more about the regionality coming from the distance from the yeast supplier.
Yeah.
So when we hear the Isle of whiskies, I think it was Hasty around about the 1920s, speaking about the yeast being delivered to Lagavulin and the deck of a puffer and warm weather, left in a store for a while. So was that playing the regionality? Again, they were all using more peat as well. That was disinfecting as well. Yes, there must have been a variation in styles. It would have kept the blender busy, trying to ensure that consistency of a style of blended whisky. But it must have produced something fascinating spirits at different times. Yeah.
Must have been a bigger difference between summer and winter as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you think, the
control of the distillation.
A barrel sitting on a deck of a puffer in the height of summer or the middle of winter, it's going to affect how the yeast behaves.
So a worthwhile exercise?
Very much so, yeah.
And you're still speaking to Leon?
Yeah.
So it's good.
Well, I'm glad you're happy at the end of it. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mysterious Distiller.
Okay, thanks for having me.
But I think it speaks to you, Francis, how you when I always speak to you, you're always looking to make it better. You're always looking, you're not I've made it this way for so long. I am.
Yeah. That was the big thing I found. You get into the routine, you do the same thing day in, and you do think about it, and you are trying to hit your marks as accurately as possible and whatnot. But this just got the brain moving so much out of the sort of comfort zone and thinking about things. And it was sort of like almost when you started first, you're just learning again.
Yeah.
And it was good. Yeah.
Good.
And well done and taking the thing and giving it a real good bash.
Great stuff, man.
Thanks, Francis.